What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kaotikast. This is episode 3, and in this episode we're going to be talking about nostalgia. And I assume this is nostalgia in all its forms, such as just video game nostalgia, nostalgia for old movies, nostalgia for old things in general. And of course, joining me as always is Levy the Amish Man.
Yeah, and you kind of cut out a little bit.
That's probably your internet. It's fine on my end.
Well, fuck it. It's nostalgia. And you know what? Great way to start off with nostalgia, because we're going to continue what we were talking about in the first podcast, which was Ghost of Sushi. It's a good game.
It is a good game.
Yeah, like, I finally got around to playing it more, and I hadn't moved on from Act 1, because there's so much shit to do.
Yeah, Ghost of Tsushima, it's like, it's one of those games where it's like, it does have the typical open world stuff in there, but you just want to continue to play the game just because the world is so beautiful and fun to explore. Like, the game is just so colorful, and there's so many, like, just beautiful environments in the game, and maybe that just has to do with it being set in Japan, I don't know, but it's just really nice to look at.
Yeah, it's like old feudal Japan, and I'm surprised that Sucker Punch actually did something right by doing their research on that, which I think is good for them.
I mean, it really says something when the Yakuza guy, the Yakuza director, says that they did a game that's more Japanese than they could do.
Yeah, by saying they're more Japanese than us.
Yeah. I mean, that should be like a badge of that would be like a badge of honor I wore if I were like a Western dev. I'd be like, hey, this Japanese developer said that I'm more Japanese than they are, and I'm like a white guy.
Where's my fucking otaku award?
Yeah.
Headed on my chest.
I'm officially Japanese now.
I get the Kurosawa award for best samurai media ever.
And we literally have a Kurosawa mode in the game.
Yeah,
which is Levy is discovering is not as interesting as it could have been, I guess. I mean, well, it's good. I'm not trying to downplay that, but it's also like has its own share of problems, in my opinion.
Like, it's interesting. It makes the game a lot more fluid and interesting, but at the same time, it also is very distracting.
Yeah. First of all, it does sound like the audio is being played through like a filter, and in terms of like of course, it just being black and white in itself is kind of a problem, because there are certain game mechanics where you do kind of need to like color is kind of necessary, such as like following the golden birds to like secret locations. There's a quest where you have to find a field of white trees or something, and that it's kind of hard to do when everything else is like white, because everything's black and white.
Yeah, it's kind of disorienting in a sense.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
It's just recommended to play in color, but I mean, people do like playing in black and white, and I can't really fault them for it.
Yeah, I can't really fault them for that either, but it's up to them. It doesn't matter how you play it, it's still a good game regardless. Yeah.
I'm already on Act 2 in the game, and so far I would have to say I'm really enjoying it. I don't know if it's really hard to say if I would say if it's game of the year or not, but it's really impressing me, I would say.
It's high up there.
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking of Kurosawa tend to be nostalgic for a lot of things. So people are probably wondering, like, what kind of definition we're going by nostalgia? Well, we're using the definition from the dictionary.
Yeah.
Which
I guess this is, I mean, which is a good thing, because we're just covering, like I said, we're covering nostalgia in everything, not just video games in particular.
Yeah, it's like, and people are like, what's nostalgia? Okay, for those of you that never picked up a dictionary, or they go by the connotative meaning of it, it is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. Which it brings up the age-old question: is nostalgia always a good thing?
I guess the best answer for that in the TLDR version would be yes and no.
Yeah, and we're going to start off by how nostalgia is a good thing. We're going to start with that first because, no one really wants to hear the positives after or, like, before the negatives or something like that. I don't know. But,
yeah.
Like, nostalgia is usually a good thing. Like, it'll just bring up, like, fond memories. Like, again, Ghost of Tsushima. For people that actually have played seen Kurosawa films, they get highly nostalgic. Like, oh yeah, they're playing the trope that is seen in a Kurosawa film.
Yeah, or just a lot of those old samurai movies in general, and not to mention a lot of, Kurosawa was a big inspiration on Lucas for the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, and it's also the same thing, like now you mentioned Star Wars. It's the same thing like that, because you see anything that's like Star Wars. Doesn't matter if it's like new, old, or kind of fairly recent, but I'm not. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say I don't think nostalgia has ever been more relevant than it really is today, and I say that because Hollywood in particular they have become completely bankrupt in terms of their ideas, and they are constantly like trying to remake movies from the 80s or from the past, or trying to reboot franchises that have not been relevant in years. And I would say sometimes, I want to emphasize, sometimes it works. Most of the time it doesn't. And the problem, too, is, like I said, they're creatively bankrupt for ideas, and they have to rely on member berries in order to get people, to draw people in, and not necessarily any sort of new ideas or anything for movies. It's just, hey, you remember this franchise? Let's bring it back, and not just let's bring it back, but let's insert our modern day ideologies into it, because that's going to make it better. It's basically resurrecting something that's old and then killing it again by bringing in modern day politics and modern day ideologies and trying to sell it to people because you believe that a lot of people are going to like this because they might agree with your ideologies or your politics or whatever you're trying to insert in this movie that is relevant today, which is usually not the case because a lot of people actually don't buy into all that kind of stuff. So when you try to do that, it's just you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're just going to lose more money than you're going to make off of it probably. I mean, we can see that with movies like, I guess, for example, we bring up like Charlie's Angels, Ghostbusters 2016. What else have they tried to do? The Thing that came out in 2011. Yeah,
I guess The Thing you could also say, but that's I wouldn't say that's necessarily an example. I mean, I guess you could say that was.
Well, yeah, but another thing you could probably mention is Halloween, probably.
Yeah, Halloween isn't okay. So Halloween is a little bit of a different thing. It's not necessarily a victim of the current day woke ideology, but it's more a victim of, like I mentioned before, the member berries. Like my biggest problem, and it's not a bad movie, but my biggest problem with the new movie is, or the new Halloween in particular, is it relies a little bit too much on fan service and trying to basically get you, be like, hey, you remember that? You remember this? And it's kind of one of those types of movies, and it's not necessarily bad. It did introduce some new things, but at the same time, it's just like it's just really trying to bank on your nostalgia for the original Halloween.
Yeah, and I mean, the Halloween movie, it wasn't terrible. I mean, it was they try to call it like a direct sequel, but then again, keep in mind, Halloween has been killed off twice already.
Yep.
Because of the past. Like, they had, I think it was 4 killed it, then 6 killed it, and then other ones killed it, and it just became terrible after that. Yeah,
it's a franchise that's definitely gone through a few different, quote unquote reboots. Or I guess you could say a couple different reboots because we have the Rob Zombie movies, and now we have these new movies that now we actually have the actual continuation as it should have been. Instead of it being like a few years later, it's like, hey,
It's actually like 40 years after the first Halloween, which I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, there are some that do it right, but then there's also a lot where it's just like the only reason it's being brought back is because they know that it's something that will probably get them some money, and they don't really have any new ideas.
Yeah, because now we actually talked about both good and bad things at the same time. I think we can find we can actually find a little bit more to how nostalgia can be a good or a bad thing, but
I think like I mean there is the appeal, like, and I guess you could ask the question, like, why do people like, why are they so drawn to like the 80s? Like, for me, it's like I in particular am drawn to like 80s horror movies, and I like 80s horror movies because 80s horror movies, I feel like there was so much variety with them, and it was like a time where there was just so many different ideas for not just horror movies but movies in general, I think, and the aesthetic was just, for a lot of these 80s movies, is just like so appealing to people that they keep coming back to it. And I think a prime example is like stuff like Stranger Things, a lot of these shows and movies that try to they're either set in the 80s or they have the 80s aesthetic to them, and by that I mean, you know, they have like synth music, or they have like they're literally shot on film, such as the case with Stranger Things, it being shot on film, or at least looks like it's shot on film.
Yeah, to give it that feel that it's an 80s movie.
Yeah. People keep coming back to that. People like seem to like it feels like, at least especially in recent years, we've had like these like movies that are either these throwback movies to like the 80s or the 70s too. They're kind of going back to that time period of a lot of I see a lot in horror movies in particular, or horror movies or movies that and shows that have horror elements in them.
Yeah, they always like put it like in that 80s, maybe 70s.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned the 70s and 80s. I think another good thing about nostalgia, it's like for people that hadn't lived it, but people who are familiar with that genre or that type of like horror, like you said, Stranger Things, it makes people really interested in like the 80s or 70s. They're kind of interested in like the aesthetic, the cars, the places, how things looked, how people were dressed. It kind of gives people that curiosity of, is this what the 80s was? Yeah.
I mean, the movies that were from that time period also kind of like, for people that are maybe growing up in this generation, or you know, or whatever, they use that, like, for me in particular, like, you know, they also use it as a way to kind of like a way to look back in time and be like, hey, this is how things were back then. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to learn about through that, through like a movie or a show that came out back then.
Yeah, but also I could actually say this too, how nostalgia can be a bad thing. Is like the whole thing is like the same thing. Like I said before, it makes people curious about it. But then, however, you're going to have on the other spectrum how people, like historians, they'll actually watch some of these shows or movies and go, that's not how they acted in the 80s. I was there.
Yeah.
People didn't do that in the 80s. They didn't do all that. It's like, okay, boomer, move on.
Yeah, so what was that, your example of nostalgia being bad?
Well, no, it's actually on. Well, I was going to say, because there's also another thing that could be a good example of it is like Bohemian Rhapsody, how people are really nostalgic for Queen, but at the same time, that film was I wouldn't say poorly depicted, but some of the things that happened with the band, like the bassist that they had was actually the fourth and not their first bassist. And they didn't really have a big falling out, like a lot of people said. But yeah, it comes to like a lot of historical, discrepancies. Inaccuracies and discrepancies, yeah. How people will point it out.
Yeah. I think for me, like, I would say it's a lot more of an issue in video games than it is like. Yeah, I mean, it could be an issue in movies and TV shows if it's overused, but I feel like it's more of an issue in like video games in particular. Sometimes it's good, don't get me wrong, but then sometimes it's not so good because, like we have like with older video games, like in archaic, people talk about archaic game design and how it's things are outdated and how it couldn't really work in this day and age. And I feel like that is kind of an issue sometimes with some games that try to we see it with some indie games too, where they try to go back to like survival horror, and some of them do it right. Like some of them do it in a way where they modernize things and they make it not feel as like, I guess for example you could bring up like tank controls. And tank controls are kind of not really around so much anymore for a good reason, and it's because it's really annoying to play with a game with tank controls. But sometimes like it depends on how it's done, I guess. Like it's really dependent, like because sometimes tank controls and having different camera angles can be an issue, as if other things are not done as well, such as maybe like enemy placement or enemies like following you and you can't really see them and they're off screen or something like that. Like that can be an issue. But I think the biggest example like I could really bring up here is Shenmue 3.
Yeah.
Because Shenmue 3, that whole game, like, totally, like, the whole intention with that is they didn't really want to change anything about, like, how I should mention, they did change things, but they also didn't change a lot of other things, too, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, the voice acting remained really weird, really awkward, and because they wanted to maintain the feel of the first two games. But apparently the reason that was the case in the first two games was mainly due to the game director not knowing a lot about English and directing the English voice actors based on his limited knowledge of English or something like that. Whereas in the third game, it was totally intentional. And it comes off that way, too.
And even though the creator actually did come out and say, because a lot of people were complaining that it looks like the Dreamcast game, it sounds like it, and it plays like it, but he came out and was like, no, you don't understand. That's what I intended to do for the fans that really love the series.
Yeah, as much as and it pains me too because I love Shenmue, but as much as I hate to say it, like Shenmue 3, in my opinion, is a huge disappointment. Like I feel like a lot of things about that game I wasn't impressed by, especially like the changes that were made, the way they changed the combat, the stamina system, how it's linked to your health is a terrible idea, and how like just running around makes you lose health.
What?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Running around in the game will make you lose health over time.
That's fucking retarded. I think.
And the combat is literally button mashing.
I don't know if no, they didn't do this. I know Breath of the Wild, like when they did the stamina bar, you run out of stamina. Hey, you can't do shit for a while, but it doesn't affect your health unless you're climbing on a cliff.
And if your health is low enough, you can't get to the point where you can't run. And if you do run, you'll go back down to being in the red, and you're basically forced to walk. Which, that's terrible idea. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but it's not, and it's infuriating. And playing an entire game like that is, I can't even describe how fucking infuriating that is.
But Chaos, you don't understand. He wanted to make it play like the original.
Yeah.
But that could bring a good point though. Because with Shenmue 3, it brought back a lot of nostalgia. Because I remember a long time ago when they announced it as a Kickstarter, like they were announcing Shenmue 3, you were excited for this fucking game.
Yeah. I say this as someone who was excited for it and someone who actually paid money toward the Kickstarter. I gave them $100.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit cheated. Fucking cheated.
And that's the thing that I've noticed though, is that all these people, like, I will use another example, Mighty Number 9. People, they play with nostalgia. And that's another thing how it could be a bad thing. Because most corporate entities would just see that as a way, it's like, oh, hey, people like this. People really enjoy this. Let's have a Kickstarter that's just like this. But then they won't keep true to their word, because that's how corporate people get to you. They play with your nostalgia, and a lot of people are either too stupid or they're not really well informed. They'll just be blinded by it. They'll just eat it up anyway.
I guess in many ways the best way to put it is nostalgia is essentially just a double-edged sword. Like, there are good things about being nostalgic for things and bringing certain elements from old media into the new can be good. Like, you know, we have certain ideas that were interesting in the 80s and in the past that would be interesting to bring back. Certain ideas, certain techniques that were used in film back then that, you know, aren't really, that are maybe not used for various reasons now, that would, if implemented properly, would be good. That same could be said for video games. It just depends. I really think it's honestly just depends on execution.
Yeah.
And it's really like, and it's a really hard thing to pull off sometimes. So I feel like sometimes it's best to, you know, you really need to know what you're doing.
Unless you're Kaiji Inafune, who has no idea what the fuck he's doing, because he's not a good businessman. He's a good designer, but not a good businessman. If you have any idea in business, you know that's not how you do it.
Yeah, he kind of just took the money and ran, as far as I know. And I think a good example, though, in comparison to that, would be like Bloodstained.
Yeah, that's like a very good comparison, because when a lot of people saw Bloodstained, like, some people were excited for it, but he actually came through with his promises. He's like, hey, I'm going to throw in updates for free, and you don't have to pay a single fucking thing for it.
And I think it was, like, when the game was in development, too, like, he had, like, playtesters, like, they would complain about certain things, and he would say, like, hey, I'm listening to you guys, I'm going to implement these changes that you suggested, and to make the game better.
Oh, what was another thing I remember, too? I remember that whenever... because I remember I watched this, like, a few months ago. Apparently, there was a company called Fangamer that actually, like, spread out the Kickstarter project. And they chose a lot of people, like, to be, like, clans and all that shit.
Oh, they did this for Shenmue 3 as well. Fangamer is also involved with Shenmue.
Oof.
Yeah, they put out the digital codes and the physical rewards.
Oof, that's kind of... Well, I will say Fangamer is a great site if you want to find, like,
I agree, yeah.
But at the same time, some of the business stuff that they've done, the only thing that was good was Bloodstained, because it was actually good. They actually brought in, what was it? They brought in Proton John and Tsunokuri-san to, like, do a game of the Igarashi or Igavania games, the ones that he was involved with. And it was also funny because they chose like, if you were a part of their clan, if you backed them up as their clan, you get a specific item. And I think one of them was an egg hat. Because the joke with him is that every time he gets a subscriber, he's giving out eggs. That's all he's doing. Because Wesker.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Okay, so did we kind of go over, like, how nostalgia can blind people, or...
I think we were a little bit,
okay.
But we got distracted by talking about Bloodstained and Mighty Number 9. But yeah, the whole thing, like, it blinds people. Like I mentioned with Mighty Number 9, people were wanting a good Mega Man game. And essentially, Inafune fucked that completely over by delaying it 3 times, even though he was paid $3 million or $4 million to make this game.
Yeah.
And he kept delaying it. He kept making up excuses. Oh, we're fixing bugs. Okay, that's fine. Second time they got delayed. Hey, we're polishing it up with the multiplayer. It's like, multiplayer? Okay. And then third time, it's like, oh, hey, we're polishing out the game and make sure there's no bugs in it. And some people gave up hope, but you had those select few that were blinded by nostalgia, and they wanted it, and they got it, and it was a piece of shit.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, like, things I could use to bring up here. As far as video games, they're probably examples, but I can't think of any on my end. But I can think of some with movies, though. Like, I know specifically the new Star Wars movies. I was one of those people who was definitely blinded by nostalgia with that. I don't know why I didn't bring this up earlier. Star Wars The Force Awakens, that whole movie is member berries. That whole movie is like, hey, do you guys remember A New Hope?
it's the best way to describe what you were saying was what was it? Lyle McDouchebag or Lyle Wrath. He made a video called "Spoilers Ahead," and it's Star Wars. So one of the lines in it is like, "This movie just says, hey, remember Star Wars?"
Yeah. Because it's like so many things in that movie, and I know this movie has been talked about to death, and I'm not here to really kind of bore you guys anymore with more Star Wars talk, but
yeah,
I should mention though, like because everybody's already talked about how the plot doesn't make any sense, how the this and that, but I will say, like, stuff like the Millennium Falcon, stuff like Han Solo just showing up, it makes no fucking sense. Yep. Why is the Millennium Falcon on this random ass desert planet? We don't know. It's never really explained. Han just is like, oh hey, you found it. And then fucking Han Solo and Chewie just show up. It's like, hey, you guys, hey, remember Han Solo? And
remember Star Wars?
Yeah. And then it's just, there's so many, and I know, like, obviously movies are essentially, there's a lot of conveniences in the plot in movies, but here things are just so convenient to a ridiculous extent where it just takes you out of it. And I'm not saying the movie didn't have good ideas, it did. But it's one of those movies where it's like, the more you think about it, the more it falls apart. And the more you realize that the whole movie was just basically just trying to bank off of your nostalgia for the original trilogy.
Yeah, it's like all it was just them going, hey, remember Star Wars? Remember how you people love Star Wars?
And then it's like, hey, we have the Darth Vader mask. And you're like, okay, but how? You don't even question it. You're just like, oh, hey, cool, it's Darth Vader mask. But then you think about it more, and you're like, why is Darth Vader mask there? Like, shouldn't it have just kind of, I mean, why
disintegrated in episode 6?
Yeah. It's just like, you just start to question so many things, and you realize it's just and this is a problem with J.J. Abrams as a whole, though. He just puts all this shit, like all these things, all these little things in his movies, like, especially if it's in a franchise movie, he's like, I'm gonna put this plot point here, and I'm not gonna worry about thinking about, like, hey, here's this really weird, strange thing here that I'm gonna set up, but I'm not gonna think about how I'm gonna answer why that's there. Just figure it out. It's this whole, like, quote unquote mystery box approach to his storytelling, where it's like, here's this really strange thing. Why is it there? I don't fucking know. I don't have the answer myself. You figure it out.
Yeah, it's like, here's a MacGuffin. Why is this MacGuffin here? You don't understand. It's my vision.
And it's like, as much as I don't really like Rian Johnson either, it's like, there's a part of him, there's a part of Last Jedi where it's like, I can kind of understand. It's like, he was kind of tasked with, trying to answer the questions that JJ set up in Force Awakens. And that's kind of hard to do, considering a lot of those questions were, like, things that I'm pretty sure JJ himself might not have had satisfactory answers to.
Yeah, he didn't, because apparently, like, it kind of made no sense. Like, when Episode 7 came out, everyone loved it. They praised it as a return to Star Wars.
I felt the same way when I first saw Last Jedi, too. I was like, because it's a Star Wars movie, and you're like, you don't want to not like a Star Wars movie. So I was like, when I first saw it, I remember when I was in theater, I was like, I was confused, and I didn't know how to feel about it. And then when I walked out of it, I was like, it was okay. And I was like, I like this movie. It was different. And then I thought about it some more, and I'm like, I really don't like this movie. It was terrible, actually. And like,
yeah, it's like, as time went on.
Yeah.
You just sat there with your alcohol, looking at all the reviews for Force Awakens, and you're like...
It's like that Red Letter Media meme or whatever, where that guy's just sitting there with, like, a beer or something. He's looking all depressed.
And you're like, why did I like this? And then you see Last Jedi, and then you look at it and you're going, what the fuck happened?
And then you have Rise of Skywalker, which is just like, oh fuck, pull out all the nostalgia, pull it out, get the nostalgia train, get the fucking freight train of nostalgia, and this, hit everybody with it. Maybe it'll save us.
Do it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, guess what, guys? Palpatine's back. Palpatine's back.
That was Star Wars.
Luke Skywalker's a good character now. Fuck.
Look, here's all the other Jedi. Here's Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu. Here's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, guys, listen. We literally got all the actors to come back just to provide voices for the fucking.
Holy shit!
Oh god,
and at the end of it, what'd you get? Disappointment.
Yep, even more disappointment. And we already didn't have high expectations for the movie in the first place. But somehow we were still let down.
Yeah, but a lot of people, they still are blinded, because I remember I was talking to someone who said that they liked Reylo. They liked the concept of Rey Skywalker and Kylo Ren being a couple. I'm just thinking at it going, I'm just looking at it going, there's no chemistry. Anakin and Padme from the prequels had more chemistry than they did.
That's another thing we got from these new movies. We got these weird Reylo people who are literally stalking Adam Driver in real life and want him and Daisy Ridley to be together, like in real life, even though Adam Driver has a wife and Daisy Ridley has a fucking boyfriend. So it's fucking weird.
But it's okay, Kaos. You should stop complaining about Star Wars right now.
But I feel like it's kind of like the same thing with, like, I think it's probably the Twilight fandom that has invaded Star Wars, because it really feels that way, because it's like the whole all these fangirls, like, they wanted Bella and Edward to be together or whatever, and were obsessing over Robert Pattinson. Now they've moved to fucking Star Wars. At least that's how it feels.
Yeah, because they got tired of it. They're like, oh yeah, let's just do this. And
now they're like, they're probably like my age. They're in their fucking 20s, and they're like, they're feeling, they're just like, they need to feel fulfillment. So they're like, this is my entire life now. I need this to happen. I need these two actors to get together, because that's all that matters in my life. But some of them are that crazy. I'm not exaggerating. Like, there was apparently there are people that legit were contemplating suicide after the Ben. I don't even care if I spoil it. Ben Solo's death in fucking Rise of Skywalker.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how nostalgia blinds.
I will be. I mean, honestly, if you feel that way about a character dying, really in anything, please seek help. Please.
Like I can understand. Like, I know this is going to be very spoiler heavy, but I don't fucking care. We're going to talk there's a lot of people that will have like conflicting emotions when a character in a fictional show or movie dies. Example, Mike from Breaking Bad. I felt connection to that because I felt fucking shocked by it. I felt like they took away something that made the show good, but they still made it better somehow.
Yeah, but it's just like, I mean, it's something. I mean, I guess this isn't always the case, but I feel like usually something's a show or a movie is doing something right if you care enough, like, that much about a character, But it's like there needs to be a line as well. It's like, don't fucking obsess over them to the point where you're just like, my life is over now that this character is dead. I have nothing to live for.
Or you have the complete opposite. You have the people that want a character to die, a.k.a. Joffrey from Game of Thrones. People are like, when is this little shit gonna die? And in the episode when he finally dies, everyone was like, yes, he's dead! Fuck this motherfucker!
That's how I felt.
And then there's worse characters that popped up, and they're like, God damn it.
Yeah, and then the later seasons are basically just fan service, and at least season 6 and 7 are fan service, and then season 8 is just the antithesis of that.
Yeah, it was like the opposite. That they were really very. I think now we're using at this point how nostalgia is now used in the film industry, because they've been doing that a lot. Like in film and television, they've been doing that a lot. They'll play with the nostalgia, like, hey, you love this character in the first season, but what are you going to do in the last season? Oh, we're going to build them up throughout the show, and then at the end, they're fucking useless.
Yeah, I don't know who I should blame for this, because I know it started with Rian Johnson's whole we need to subvert expectations thing, and then apparently the Game of Thrones guys took that idea and ran with it about subverting your expectations, and it's like, that idea in and of itself is not bad, but the problem is when you do it just to do it, just for the sake of shock value, it loses any sort of effect you might have intended it to have, because there was no proper build up to it, and it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Pretty much.
Like, you know, yeah, sure, I'm surprised because it didn't make any fucking sense, not because it's clever. See, that's the thing they don't realize. There's a difference between being clever and doing something just to shock the audience, which is all this really is.
Yep.
And then the result of that isn't anything positive most of the time. It's the audience hating it and hating you by extension.
You pretty much. And what was another thing? It's like, they do that a lot. It's like these characters as well. Fucking, what was one character that they done that for? For fucking... Now I'm thinking of Game of Thrones now. Shit.
I feel like we should just do like a Game of Thrones podcast and talk about all the things that went wrong in like the final season.
Just have like the whole fucking podcast just talking about how fucking season 8 was an abomination. What about the 1 through 7?
There's just so many things to be said about that too. Like, I feel like we could talk about the other seasons too. Like after 5, how things just kind of really went off the rails. It seemed like season 6 wasn't bad, but it felt like that was like the beginning. Actually, no, there were some really bad things in season 6. I completely forgot about the Arya plot.
Yeah, that's what I was reaching. That's what I was meaning, because, like I said, like in the film, they like bring back characters, or they'll like build on characters, and they'll be like, "You like this character? This character is you. It's how you feel like when you were growing up." And then all of a sudden, oh, cool, they're going to become badass at the end. No, they're fucking clumsy as shit.
Yeah, it's really bad writing. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's like, don't get me wrong, nostalgia, if used right, it could be a good thing. Like, example, now I'm going to use 2 shows as an example. One good, or actually 3. One good, one bad, and one that suffers from both. I would say, like, a show that is really good, even though the second season wasn't all that bad, but it still was better than the other shows I've seen, like Stranger Things, because they did the whole 80s vibe well. I mentioned that before, but it plays by people like people who were born in the late 70s, early 80s. They get to see all of that and go, "Huh, this is what it was like when I was a kid." But the writing of it made it good. It brought back good writing. It had good writing and all that.
And it was also a combination of different movies from that time period too. Like, it was somewhat E.T. It was somewhat like Stephen King stuff, and as well as some other things. I mean, obviously it had that, and it also had various different things you were familiar with in the 80s, like 80s pop culture stuff, and it had a genuinely good story and good characters.
Yeah, but then there's another show that was like, it was good, but it had some mixed emotions. Like, the one that you can definitely say is like Game of Thrones or Walking Dead. But that's Walking Dead is like towards the bad spectrum, in my opinion.
I guess with Walking Dead, in terms of nostalgia topic, you could use, I guess, obviously the Romero films as
they were highly influenced by like old zombie films.
But Walking Dead, like, I wouldn't say it's a subversion, but it's more like it's one of those shows where it's supposed to be, at least, not so much about, like, the zombies, and it's more about the people trying to survive the apocalypse and less just about the zombies themselves. Whereas the Romero movies were more focused on the zombies and not so much just the survivors and the human drama.
With character development. Another film that can be really good with that is like 28 Days Later. They show characters, but also zombies.
Yeah, and of course that also started the running zombie trend.
Yeah. And what was it? You know why The Walking Dead, I put that as a bad spectrum, because when it first came out, it had the nostalgia of zombies, and they did it well with the first season, but then they ruined it with season 2.
Because season 2 became more of a soap opera.
Yeah, and that's one thing I hated, because they turned something that was like for nostalgia for people like zombies, like old zombie films, or good character development in zombie films, if that actually was a thing back then. But they just essentially made it worse. They took that nostalgia and just made everything bad.
Yeah. I mean, they just... It's kind of like they lost the focus of what made the show interesting in the first place. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that happens with a lot of shows, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, but I know for a fact they ruined... It's not ruined, but they've gone off the deep end as the series went on.
Yeah, it's one of those shows that it's just like, oh boy, what happened?
Well, fuck, I don't know what happened. Discord's stupid.
Well, that's great. Anyways,
we'll leave it in. We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
No, we'll do it live. Fuck it.
Fucking thing sucks.
Okay, so I was saying, yeah, it's just one of those shows that's just like gone on for way too long, and it's outstayed its welcome. It's gotten so like repetitive, like in terms of certain plot points and certain characters just having all this plot armor, and especially in a show where it's like it was trying to be like, you know, saying, you know, certain characters are not invulnerable and they can die.
Yeah.
But then in the show, Rick just survives the whole fucking thing, and certain other characters will just never die, like Daryl, because he's a fan favorite, so he's never going to die.
Favorite. And you know what? We're going to talk about like other things. Like now, we're going to talk about like the nitty gritty about how nostalgia was like using a bad thing. Talking about Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I mean, we did already kind of touch on this, but
we touched on it, but we didn't really touch on it further.
Yeah, I mean, I did really bring that up a lot with how the Star Wars sequel trilogy was basically just totally sold on nostalgia.
Yeah, and now we're going to talk about the 2016 reboot, like the people that love Ghostbusters, like the ones that are fanatics about it, because Ghostbusters was great, even though the second one wasn't as good as the first. It still was better than the 2016 reboot.
Yeah, I think the 2016 reboot, too, is, like I mentioned earlier, an example of one of those things they resurrected just to give it a modern-day makeover, and not necessarily in a way that respects the franchise that, you know, it respects the Ghostbusters franchise. It's more just people joke about it, they call it like Fembusters, because it's basically that's what it is. It's the feminist Ghostbusters, essentially.
The Ballbusters.
Yeah, like, because of course, you know, it's not the movie's not funny, and it's just, you know, basically a typical like girl power movie, because we're just gonna replace all the men with women. And Leslie Jones, Leslie Jones and fucking Melissa McCarthy, which are both the antithesis of humor, in my opinion. I don't find them funny.
It depends on what you do, like what roles they're given, or mostly Melissa
McCarthy. I guess I should say that because to be fair, I haven't seen a lot of their other roles, but for the most part, it could have just been the writing in this movie, but jokes were fucking horrible.
It was the right, and then they got they brought in fucking Thor, Chris Hemsworth to play the fucking idiot. He's just the idiot in the movie, essentially. Like, he's the comedy. Well, all the characters in the movie are kind of like comic relief, but he's just there basically for a joke. Like, that's his whole fucking purpose. It's like you said, they're trying to play into the woke audience by also using the men are idiots TV trope.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole movie, and I mean, not to mention, that and just the how it doesn't really respect what came before it. I know, of course, they have Bill. I think it's Bill Murray.
Bill Murray.
Yeah, he's in there. Like, he has a cameo. That's pretty much it.
But apparently in that movie, they kill off his character in the movie.
Yeah, good job, guys. That's definitely going to get people to like your movie if you get one of the original cast.
Well, he didn't really play the character from Ghostbusters. He just played a random character in it.
I feel like that's even worse.
Yeah, and it's really bad though.
Yeah.
But I guess they somewhat learned their lesson because now there's a new Ghostbusters coming out.
Yeah, and this one seems to be trying to correct the mistakes, of course, that the 2016 movie made.
Well, apparently it's not even tied into the reboot. It's tied into the Ghostbusters.
The original. 2. Yeah, but I mean, in that, I mean, it's trying to basically be a better movie, in that it's trying to respect like what came before it, and it's trying to actually be like a Ghostbusters movie and not connected to, you know, not like a total reboot or anything, but like a kind of like a follow up to the original movies.
Yeah, what was it? Afterlife.
Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Because they brought in. Yep. It is a fucking official. They brought in the original Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And the secretary and Sigourney Weaver. Yeah, they brought in everybody for that.
Which I like. I like that they brought back some of the original cast.
Yeah, but they couldn't bring back one because Harold Ramis died in 2014, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually kind of anticipating, because if it's a direct sequel to fucking Ghostbusters 2 and all that, it's actually going to be good.
What about like the James Bond movies? Because they've been going for so long. And
that's actually, the whole spy thing. That's actually a good way for nostalgia too.
Yeah.
Because everyone remembers James Bond. I think as time went on for James Bond, like the actors that they brought in, like some of them could do it justice, but it causes like a big fucking argument on the internet. Like, who played Bond better? Brosnan? No. Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
It just sparks arguments of who played Bond better, but we all know the real answer is Sean Connery. Thank you very much.
I would pretty much have to agree with that, yeah. Yeah, and I also bring that up just because it's another franchise that's supposedly falling victim to the wokeness. Because, you know, there's No Time to Die is going through so many different reshoots and rewrites and all this other stuff, just because it's a lot of the test audiences, it hasn't been doing well with test audiences, and they're having to go back and like scrambling just to redo the film so it'll actually please the audience. And a lot of that is also due to the I think her name's Lashana Lynch, the actress. She's supposedly, there's the rumor that she's replacing 007, that she's going to be the new James Bond, technically, sort of, and James Bond's going to retire in this movie. She's going to take over, and so I don't know. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing about this movie, it sounds like it could be a total disaster. And this is supposedly going to be like the last Daniel Craig Bond movie, I think.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Like, it's and it sucks too, because I know one of the people that were apparently working on the movie was Cary Fukunaga, who I actually really like as like a writer director, because he did the first season of True Detective. And he also did the original script for the It movie. And a lot of like the things he had in the script were used in the final movie.
Yep, he's still doing the movie and the screenplay, the story, and he's also directing it.
For the James Bond movie?
Yeah, for that one.
Yeah, I just don't know. It could be good. It could be a disaster. It's I've never really been a huge James Bond fan, so to be honest, I don't really. I don't care too much as some other people, but I guess I would just bring it up as an example of one of these old franchises that has kind of fallen victim. You know, it's still around, and it's fallen victim to like modern day bullshit. The same thing with some of these other movies and TV shows, or even video games that are brought back and then injected with our modern day ideologies or our modern day ideas, and in a lot of ways that sometimes kind of destroys the original image of what that thing was, and kind of because that's not what it was originally, or what it, for whatever other reason, it ends up not being that good of an idea to kind of inject our modern day stuff into it, because it was made in a different time. And sometimes that people like like it for that reason, and that image kind of needs to be preserved in some way.
Yeah, and most of the time they either preserve it, try to preserve it, or they don't even do it at all and just do something different with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I will make the concession. Sometimes that can be good. It really just depends on what is done with it.
Especially in film.
But more often than not, this ends up being a fucking horrible idea. Most of the time, what you really should just do is bring this back and give it a new coat of paint, or bring it back, introduce some new, different ideas that pay some respect to the original movie or the original franchise, and there you go. You don't need to do all this other shit that just basically completely changes it and makes it unrecognizable from what it was before.
Yeah, and most people don't want that because some people can't really accept change as well.
There was another remake that was totally unnecessary that I think came out not too long ago, Black Christmas. They did another Black Christmas. Black Christmas was a horror movie from the 1970s, and they remade it twice now because they did a remake in 2005, and now they just recently did a new one. It was basically the feminist Black Christmas, because in this version of the movie, the sorority girls, they aren't just victims of the killer in the house. They are kicking his ass and girl power and all that shit. That's the impression the trailer gave me, and apparently I wasn't too far off on that assumption according to some of the reviews. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm looking up like one of the fucking actresses that played it in. Who the fuck? Imogen Poots. It's just
what?
Imogen Gay Poots. Like,
I didn't even look into the actors.
I didn't. I just looked up the whole Black Christmas thing, and it's a part of the Black Christmas series.
It's really not a series. It's just it was one movie and it was remade twice.
Yeah, it was remade twice. Yeah, there's one that was supposed to be... No, actually, no. It was shortly really at the release of the 2016 remake, or 2006 remake, which was a direct sequel to the 74 film.
I don't remember if it was a sequel. I remember it was just basically just a remake. It could be a sequel.
Let's see. It's a loose second remake, and it's just no. Just not looking at it.
Yeah. Wow. Remakes. They can either be good or they could be terrible.
Yeah. Oh Lord.
I'm looking at you, Nightmare on Elm Street.
What fucking Rorschach is? Goddamn Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, and apparently they make it a lot more obvious that he was a kitty diddler in that one.
Ugh.
And he's not being played by Robert Englund, so it's like that already makes it not very good.
Yeah, that's even the worst one.
Yeah. What topic are we on now?
I think we're talking about nostalgia and film, but I think the majority of this fucking podcast has been talking about film. I think we should move on to gaming now.
Yeah, like we did touch on gaming, but I guess there's a lot more things we could talk about with that.
But we didn't really touch a whole lot of it, though.
True.
But yeah, it's like the funny part about it. There's a lot you could say about gaming too, like how a lot of people can use nostalgia, but most likely it's found in indie games or some AAA games. Like example, Ghost of Tsushima being nostalgic of a Kurosawa film. Uncharted 4 bringing in a Crash Bandicoot level to say, yeah, Naughty Dog made this.
I've got a weird one. GTA Vice City.
What did they do for that one?
Well, just being the setting, like
yeah. That's actually a fair point. Because Vice City, they brought in the look, the vibe, and the music from the 80s or 70s. Mm-hmm. Which, that's also a good example for gaming. But also... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there are games that use like the setting, like the 80s setting, and they take full advantage of it, and they have it either reflect in the art style or the or something else, character designs or whatever. They have it obvious it's set in the 80s.
Okay, yep.
80s or any other
86.
time period.
Yeah, it was 86.
Yep.
But yeah, that's another one that did well too. But also a lot of indie games that kind of use retro style graphics for their games, but also give it a twist. Another one can be used is like most indie games that follow the Metroidvania style gameplay.
Yeah, like we could also bring up games that are still like being made on the build engine, like the engine that was the Doom, the original Doom used, and like Duke Nukem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like Ion Fury game recently came out. It was made on build engine.
Ion Fury. Another one is Medieval.
Yeah. There's also there's a lot of these like old school like first person shooter throwback games that they're doing, where it's like, you know, kind of trying to be like one of those 90s first person shooters. There some examples, I guess, bring up a Medieval. What was the other one? Fuck. It was Dusk. It was made by the same guys. And they've basically, like, that developer's mostly just been doing like the old school shooters. And then there's another game called Wrath Ion of Ruin that's kind of like it kind of has like the old school graphics, kind of looks sort of like an N64 game.
Yeah, what was another one like back in 1995, which is supposed to play like Resident Evil?
I heard that game wasn't very good.
I heard it was very meh.
Yeah.
What was another one? Daymare is supposed to play like Resident Evil.
Yeah, Daymare is a little bit of a mixed bag. Like it's a decent game for what it is, though. You know, it's made by a small indie team, so I can't fault it too much. But it's good for what it is. And there's also Remothered, which is heavily inspired by the Clock Tower games.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna bring this up since we talked about Star Wars for the longest time. I'm gonna bring up something for the gaming industry because we all know that most video games are either remakes, reboots, or anything else. I'm gonna talk about that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's a problem in games as well.
Yeah, it's like good example. But the funny thing is, good examples of it is like Ratchet and Clank. Okay, that's a good way to do a reboot, but did it have to be based on the movie, based on the game?
Yeah, that was a weird thing with the Ratchet and Clank game. That it had, like, it was based on the movie, and then the movie wasn't very good, but the game was. It is really weird.
Yeah. That's a weird thing. It's also could be used for nostalgia because they brought in like, hey, this is Ratchet and Clank. Y'all played these games on the PS2 and PS3. We're gonna bring that to the big screen. But here's a game that ties into that, and people just played the game.
Yeah, and the movie was just like, yeah.
Yeah, the movie was just very hit or miss. Like some people like it, some people don't care for it, and some people just hated it and say that it was not a good film adaptation.
Yeah. Like I guess one thing I can think of too is just the like one of these like reboot games, like Tomb Raider games. Those are reboots, obviously, of the original Tomb Raider, although I would say they don't really resemble the original Tomb Raider that much, in my opinion.
Like, I'll say, like, the first reboot game from Tomb Raider wasn't so bad.
Yeah, I guess you could argue, like, hey, it's a different interpretation of Laura, and I'm like, okay, but it also has a lot of these modern gaming conventions we've come to expect from most of the games that come out today. And it's not even really, at least later on in the games, it becomes a lot less about raiding tombs. The first game didn't have, like, it felt like the first game had a lot more tombs to raid than, like, the second one. The second one just didn't really have, like, there are just these smaller tombs, and the game's called Tomb Raider, but you don't really do a lot of tomb raiding in the game. It's kind of weird how that works out.
Yeah, I just noticed it's just really bad. Like, the gameplay for that, it felt great. Story wasn't all that impressive, but hey, I'll take what I can get for, like, $20 or something.
And then it, like, I mean, I didn't mind it being more like a a more inexperienced Lara, but I feel like you can only take that so far. Like, I feel like in the second game, she should have been a little bit more... She should have gone through a little bit more development. And the second game, she's still pretty much how she was in the first game. Although in the second game, she's just killing a lot more people and comes off more as like a mass murderer. I mean, especially in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where she somehow inadvertently kills an entire village of people by basically unleashing a natural disaster as a result of her recovering some ancient artifact. So that's how the game opens. You find out that Lara did that, and I don't think they ever really addressed that again, which is really weird.
Yeah, they don't. And that's the sad thing, though, is that those two games, like, the first one, Become the Tomb Raider. Okay, second one, Become the Tomb Raider. I thought I already was.
Yeah, it's like, when are we actually going to become the Tomb Raider?
Oh, we'll become the Tomb Raider with another reboot.
Yeah, it got really ridiculous. I'm just like, this is just not Lara Croft.
Yeah. And also, like, gaming also can use nostalgia. Like, example, Uncharted. I mentioned the Crash Bandicoot thing, but the whole entire franchise just reminds me of like an actual good Indiana Jones movie. But it's not Indiana Jones.
And it's obvious that's where they got a lot of their inspiration from.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. Like, they can use film for that.
Yeah, it's like the good Indiana Jones game, you know, that is not actually Indiana Jones.
Yeah. And other games, like the original Resident Evil, before it became what it is now, that was based off of like cheesy B-movie zombie films.
Yeah, and it worked well for what it was.
Yeah, and then the series got better or for worse.
Well, I would say the series, as it moved on, it became less. It became more about these bioweapons, and you know the zombies were still there, but it felt like there was a lot more focus on these like weird BOW monsters.
Yep, and it just became worse. And then you have like Resident Evil remake, or RE2 remake, which was a good play on with nostalgia, and they did everything right. Then you have the third remake,
which was a rush job.
It was a rush job, and they still play with nostalgia because a lot of people will come out and say, "Oh yeah, Resident Evil 3 is really good." Okay, is it better than the original? No, but it's still really good. It does the original work. The original's worse compared to this one.
Yeah, it's just like you have the original game where you had all these different choices you could make, and there were so many different paths that you could go down because of these different choices. Like, different things will happen. So it already had, just because of that, it already had some, like, a lot of replayability to it. And then you have this game, which is incredibly linear, and it also cuts out certain areas from the original game. So, you know, yeah, in that sense, it's like, it's, you know, we had a decent remake with RE2. It, you know, it didn't have the original fixed camera angles and the tank controls, and certain group of people were pissed off about that. But I would argue that it brought things, you know, into a modern gameplay. You know, it had a decent. It felt like a survival horror game, because, you know, you still had a lot of these threats around you, and, you know, yeah, it was more action-oriented than maybe the original game was, because it was, like, third-person over the shoulder, and maybe not, you know, fixed camera angles and tank controls, but...
You know, that's what people seem to hate nowadays.
What, the
tank controls.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's like, I feel like the amount of people, like, more people would probably be annoyed by them bringing in tank controls and fixed camera angles than they would if they just, you know, made the game like how it was, with the third-person camera and, you know, it being a little bit more action-oriented. Tank controls are, you know, I think you really have kind of a small minority of people that want it, and to an extent I can understand, you know, why people would see, you know, can argue for the appeal of it, but it's just not something, it's kind of not there anymore for a good reason, I would say. It works for some things, but most of the time it comes off as more of an inconvenience. when you have fixed camera angles, and especially when you have tank controls.
Yeah, and then what was it? Then you have people that say that it doesn't capture the true essence of what made Resident Evil great, and I'm like thinking, okay, then what would?
Yeah, I mean, some people are just never going to be pleased. That's another thing.
That's another thing that I've noticed. Like, back to the whole thing about nostalgia blinding people. Like, people would want one thing, but when they get something different, they just don't even like it. They just brush away the whole entire thing, entirely. It's like, what the fuck? You can never be pleased?
Yeah, I think Capcom is another company we can bring up in terms of gaming and kind of banking on nostalgia, because of course now they've announced they're doing RE4 remake after RE3 remake,
which is just making all these nostalgia people like they can never be so erect at this point.
Yeah. Now I'm waiting for RE5 remake.
No, we're gonna skip 5. We're gonna go straight to 6.
6, I would be okay with, to be honest. I feel like that game kind of needs a remake.
Remakes? No, they're gonna remake 6, but it's gonna be the same as the original.
Jesus.
Hey, yeah. you like Jake? No.
6 was the point where they realized it's like, I think we went a little bit too far.
Yeah. Like, I've noticed that too. Like, as soon as RE4 got announced for a remake, people start shitting their pants because they got so excited about it. And I'm just looking at it going, okay, why is everyone excited?
This is a game that's been ported to multiple different platforms, and it's one of the games that I really would say is least in need of a remake. Like, would I be okay with a remake? Sure. I think there's a lot of things they could do, a lot of new things they could do to make the game interesting and maybe different from the original, but at the same time, it's like, this game really doesn't need a remake. Like, it's one of those games where it's like, it's really accessible for a lot of people, and it really just does not, there's not really a lot of reason to remake this game. It's not really that old of a game. It plays really similar to a lot of the more modern Resident Evil games.
Yeah, and good lord, you want to know how many fucking consoles this game has been on?
How many?
12. The latest one being the Switch.
Yeah, there's so many different ports.
Yep, GameCube, PS2, Windows, Wii, iOS, Zeebo. I don't know what the fuck that is.
I don't even. Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't either, but PS3, 360, Android.
I thought you were about to tell me it was also on the N-Gage.
Yeah, and then PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. It's been on it for so long.
Yeah, which is another reason why I'm just like, this is, I mean, I could understand people's frustrations where it's like, Code Veronica is the game we should have gotten instead of Resident Evil 4, because Code Veronica is a game that is, not as well known in the Resident Evil franchise, and it's a little bit, it's a little bit outdated. Like, maybe we do need a remake of that. Resident Evil 4, not so much. It's the one that I would say is probably least in need of a remake. Code Veronica is one I would definitely argue more for than Resident Evil 4. And of course we have people who are basically just, oh, well, whatever, dude. Code Veronica doesn't need a remake, you're crazy. But I'm just like, but it's still one of those games where it's just like, it definitely hasn't been ported. I mean, there's a few different ports of it, but it's not to the extent of RE4. It's one of the more like lesser known Resident Evil games.
It's the underrated gem of the bunch.
And it apparently was originally going to be Resident Evil 4. So, I think there's plenty of good reason for them to remake that game.
Yeah, but knowing them, they probably won't. They probably won't because it probably didn't sell that well. I don't think.
That could be the reason. I mean, I can understand from a corporate point of view, you want to go where the money's at.
Yeah, and they're going to
Resident Evil 4 is the cash cow, so that's where they went.
Yep, pretty much. That's where they went into. And apparently they did do an HD remaster, but it wasn't the same.
Oh, Code Veronica, yeah, I knew about that.
Yeah, sales, let's see. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Oh wait, no. Dreamcast sold 450,000 units, so they were weak.
Mm-hmm.
But the PS2 version sold like almost close to 1 million. So that's why. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't completely understand. I get it from a business standpoint. However, from just I guess I'm arguing more so from a consumer standpoint, where it's just like you have this game that's chronologically the next game in the series after Nemesis, and you skip that one, and you do the one that's been done to death, and everybody's played.
Even their grandmothers have played it.
Yep. Yeah. And then you have Silent Hill, which is the series that has just kind of, in my opinion, that is dead and has stayed dead for a while now. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to see a proper return to. We almost did, but that's unfortunately not going to happen. And it sucks because I feel like Kojima had some good ideas with Silent Hills, but it's probably never going to see the light of day. It might. I mean, there are rumors that it could come back, but those are just rumors at this point.
There's a rumor that, Sony might buy the IP of not Resident Evil, Silent Hill, but it was just all rumor, so...
Yeah, there was rumors they were in talks with Kojima about it, but that's all we've really heard about it.
He'll probably make that into a walking sim and call it Death Stranding 2.
Death Stranding is... I know we're kind of veering off the topic of nostalgia, but Death Stranding is a game where I was just like... It's probably not as bad as everybody's saying it is, but it's also a game where I'm just like... I thought it was going to be one thing, and it ended up being something completely different.
Yeah.
I think that was everybody's take on the game, too.
I mean, would I buy it? Yeah, if it was half off.
Same. I mean, it's a strange, quirky, and unique game. I would say in some ways a good way, and other ways not so much. It is literally a walking simulator, though, so you really have to go in expecting that. And a lot of people weren't. A lot of people were expecting a weird post-apocalyptic game with there was kind of like a third-person shooter with like maybe like survival horror elements, and that's not what we got.
Yeah, instead we ended up getting something much, much worse.
Yeah, we got UPS Man in the post-apocalyptic world.
Yep. But what was this? Now I'm trying to think of more and more things of what could go wrong with the gaming industry now. But now I'm gonna talk about the one remake / reboot / reimagining that really just tugs at people's nostalgia, which is Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, it's... I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake is a little bit of a weird case, too, just because it's... and you really would have to spoil things in order to explain...
But we won't do that here.
Yeah. Let's just say that 7 Remake is a remake, and at the same time it's not.
It's a reimagining.
Yeah, reimagining would be the best way to say to put it. And then, of course, for the second game, we have so many conflicting rumors as to if it is going to follow the original plot line, if it's not going to follow the original plot line. They're saying different things about it, so it's really hard to say what the case is going to be for that game.
Yeah, even Tetsuya Nomura even said that he wanted to do something Final Fantasy related. But he also did say that he wanted to do something different for Final Fantasy VII.
And that he did.
Which, funny enough, I remember when Final Fantasy VII Remake, in quotes, remake came out, and one of my coworkers would not shut up about it, saying it's one of the best games ever made. He called it a sequel, and I'm just looking at him going, how is it a sequel?
Yeah, there's that theory out there that it is one.
And then he's trying to argue the point that it's a remake and it's a sequel, but yet I'm looking at it from a different point, saying it's more of a reboot than a fucking remake, in my opinion.
Yeah, reboot, reimagining, I think is the best description of it.
I even said that. It's like, it's a reimagining. They took the original story. Sure, they kept true to the element of it, but the whole entire game takes place in Midgar, which is like the first 10 hours of the first disc.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest criticisms about the remake is they really fucking pad the hell out of the Midgar section.
Well, not only padded out, they fucking like said, nah, this is all it's gonna be. You don't like it, you'll still buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it probably helps that I didn't play the original game, that I'm not as upset about that, but I probably would be if I did. I'd be like, wow, this is the whole game.
Like, now if we're going to talk like Final Fantasy IX remake, if they ever made that, and if they did some changes to it, then yeah, I would say something about it. But I don't really have anything bad to say about 7 because I didn't really play the original all the way through.
Speaking of 9, apparently there are rumors of a 9 sequel supposedly being talked about or being in the works, I guess.
I don't know how the fuck that would work, though.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that.
Like, I'm just looking back at when I played the game, because I don't want to spoil it for you, but how the fuck would it work?
Yeah, I feel like maybe like a remake or something would work better.
Like a remake would be better, but no, they end up taking the Steam version of the game and porting it over to PS4.
It would be interesting to see that game remade too, just because it had such a interesting art style, and it was more lighthearted and cartoonish as opposed to like some of the other Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8.
Yeah, because Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8, they kind of had like a futuristic steampunk type of vibe or cyberpunk vibe.
Yeah, they had more realistic character designs.
Yeah, well, Final Fantasy IX followed the Renaissance period of art, and they used it to its advantage.
Yeah, and the character designs, too, are pretty different. Like, characters have just, like, bigger heads, like, small bodies, and not as realistic proportions, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, which I like. That's one of the reasons why I like 9, because visually it's good, and it's a pretty good art style.
Yeah, it's really different from the other games.
And it's highly nostalgic. Like, speaking of like any RPG like nowadays that has turn-based mechanics is very nostalgic.
I mean, factor in Final Fantasy IX in terms of being nostalgic in a good way, because 9 was kind of trying to be like the original Final Fantasy, like the very first Final Fantasy games. Trying to go back to that.
It's like, funny enough, the creator of Final Fantasy, I'm trying to remember his name. I just can't really think.
Oh, the guy that first made it.
Let's see, creator. Oh yeah, Hironobu Sakaguchi. He actually said, and I quote, well, exaggerated quotes. He loved Final Fantasy IX because it was a return of the roots to the series, which I heavily agree.
Yeah, I mean, you see that somewhat with, stuff like Resident Evil games, too. They're trying to go back to, supposedly at least, trying to go back to roots.
Yeah, especially like with Resident Evil 7. Like, first-person shooter, but they're trying to give you the element that will creep you out. Like it's an old zombie film.
Yeah, and I know, like, people are, there's so many different opinions on this, and if they actually did go back to roots, but to me, I feel like to some extent there was an attempt. Whether it was successful or not is debatable. It still tried to have a survival horror atmosphere, at least. It still tried to do certain things that the original games did, like having specific keys for specific doors, having Jack kind of chase you around the house every now and again was kind of similar to stuff like Mr. X and Nemesis. There's some other stuff in there too, but I feel like it was, it did try to go back to that, and of course, like I said, debatable to the degree of success it had, but I feel like there was an attempt. There was an attempt there.
It was an attempt, but it worked in some areas, didn't in the rest.
Yeah, a little bit of a mixed bag.
Oh boy. Very, very mixed bag.
Yeah.
But now we're going to talk about our nostalgias. I think we should start with your nostalgia. Like, what things make you nostalgic?
Oh,
like things you enjoy. I can use that in terms.
Oh, the original PlayStation. I know, like, as a kid, like, every time I booted up the PlayStation and, like, the Sony logo or the PlayStation, like, the, what's that sound? It was like, no. I came on, turned it on, and I was like, that's one of the things when I hear it, I'm just like, I remember that, you know?
As soon as you hear it, it's like that gif of Snake turning to an old man. That's how you feel.
Yeah. The Goosebumps, like the Goosebumps intro, because basically like anything that came on Nickelodeon, because I watched a lot of Nickelodeon as a kid. The Goosebumps intro, as a kid at least, it freaked me the fuck out. It's weird. The music creeped me out. The imagery creeped me out. The fucking dog with the green eyes was fucking creepy. I was fucking terrified of that. Fucking Goosebumps like traumatized me as a kid.
Yeah.
It's like, are you afraid of the dark? That intro was actually even creepier. That fucking Jesus Christ. There's like some laughing children. There was like a fire just going out, and then there's like, yeah, it just creeped you the fuck out, man. Like, it was creepy. That was another show, like, in terms of video games, like Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot.
The remasters. As soon as you play the remasters, you're like, I remember this.
Yeah. Ripto's Rage, yeah, like Ripto's Rage and Spyro 3. And I don't remember as much about Spyro 1, honestly. Like, I mostly remember like 2 and 3.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people, they don't really they do remember Spyro, but not the first one. It's usually Ripto's Rage or Year of the Dragon. Same with Crash. A lot of people don't remember 1,
yeah.
Like 2 and 3.
There's also like Blockbuster Video, like VHS tapes. You know, I had a lot of VHS tapes. I went to Blockbuster, and man, I fucking miss that. Like, I miss video stores. I really do. I fucking miss video stores. Like, you had Hollywood Video, we had Hollywood Video, we had a Blockbuster, and it was so fucking cool, like, to walk in there and see all the movies on the shelves and see all the games, and just like, and you could just like pick up something and you had no idea what the fuck it was, and you're like, I don't know what this is, but it looks interesting and I'm gonna watch it, you know. And there's like it had an appeal, and it's like, it's like, you know, yeah, is streaming more convenient? It is, but I feel like you're also losing something. Like, you're losing the experience of like walking into the store and just like browsing the store, you know. And not only did they have movies, but they had all this other stuff too. There was like cool stuff they had. Like, they had posters, they had all of it, like, it had candy. It was fucking awesome. And
yeah, it's like a movie. Like, you're gonna go to a movie later. Here, buy some popcorn, buy some candy.
Yeah.
Watch movies from home. Pretend you're in a theater.
Yeah, it sucks to know too. Like, and I hate to be the kids these days guy, but I'm literally gonna say kids these days will not have this experience. They'll have fucking Netflix and all this other bullshit, and they won't have Blockbuster.
Netflix, Hulu, like, they'll have all these fancy, smancy fucking video services, yet they will never understand the fucking appeal of going to a rental store.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck, what else? There's probably other things, but, you know, that's mostly what I, like, the main things, like, at least entertainment related, that I really remember, like, from my childhood, and it was nostalgic to me.
Yeah, like, I kind of want to say the other things too. Is like, for like Blockbuster Video, I didn't really go to Blockbuster because my family.
Oh, okay. One more thing. I fucking love dinosaurs, and I also, by extension, love the Jurassic Park movies. So, really fucking nostalgic for those.
this movie isn't for you, kid. Shut up.
And I know people shit on it, but I think Jurassic Park 3 is an okay movie. Like, it's not bad. A lot of people don't like it. It's not that bad. It has that shit, but it's just like, but it doesn't make it bad. It's funny. It's just like one of those movies. It's like it's not. It doesn't make it bad. It's like it's a weird thing in there you can laugh at. Like, does that make the movie bad? No. It's, you know, and I honestly I like the first 3 movies a lot better than the fucking Jurassic World movies. So, you know, not to say those movies are bad, or at least not the first one. I haven't seen Fallen Kingdom. The first one's okay, but I still would put 3 over it, to be quite honest. Like, it's just
Jurassic World. Yeah.
But go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say Jurassic World. I remember that a lot of people... Yeah, now we're going to go back to... It's the same thing with the film industry. I'm going to go back to that just for a little tiny bit. I remember when people were so going apeshit over Jurassic World, and people saw it and they're like, this is the best movie ever. And it had the Star Wars appeal, how everyone liked it, and then the sequel came out and everyone went, could be better.
Yeah, it was another one of those movies where it's just like, hey, you guys remember? You remember the park? You remember how cool it was? Well, we're doing it again. Just don't, you know, it's like, and if you think about it in the context of the world the movie takes place in, you're like, why would they do this again? Why would they do this fucking park again when it's proven to be dangerous in the past and killed tons of fucking people, and they're doing it again? Why?
Because fuck it, dinosaurs.
Yeah. Oh, holy fucking shit, it's a dinosaur.
Dinosaur, holy shit.
Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
God damn it, now we're reminded of that song again. It could be worse. Oh, shit.
I'm also just reminded of fucking Dennis Nedry. That was like one of the funniest things in the first movie, that the fat guy, Dennis Nedry, the fat computer geek. And that scene where he's in like the Jeep, or like he's just in the Jeep, and he goes out of the Jeep and he's like trying to track down this one dinosaur. I forget what the exact species is, but he gets back in the Jeep
and like, it just screams at him.
It just like screams at him. He's like, fucking in the Jeep.
And then he ends up dying. I forget what they're called. Hang on.
I don't know. And then there was that the thing that really I laughed at a lot when I was a kid. That computer program that like Sam Jackson was arguing with. And it was like, say the magic word. And he's like, please.
You didn't say the magic word.
Please! God damn it!
Motherfucker.
There's so many quotes in that movie. You know, hold on to your butts. So many quotes from that. So many quotes.
Dilophosaurus. It was the one that kind of had the what was it? The fins that spread open when they screamed. Yeah,
Dennis Nedry was like, "Oh, hey there, how you doing?" And then just fucking screams at him.
How you doing? Say hi to your mother for me. Pull up the Marky Mark bullshit.
Oh god. I love those movies.
It's kind of like a guilty pleasure for you now.
Oh yeah. Jurassic Park 3, I would say, is definitely also a guilty pleasure movie. Lost World is also not as... It's better than 3, but it's also not that good either, to be honest.
It's one of those movies that you can love.
I watched it on TV the other day, and I just, like... I remember kind of looking past it when I, like, saw it maybe the first few times, but, like, that one scene with the little black girl that she starts like swinging on the pole and she fucking kicks the velociraptor out of a window, and it's just like, when I see that, I'm just like, it's just so fucking dumb. This is so fucking dumb.
This is dumb. Why did they do this? Who thought this was a good idea?
And then of course Jeff Goldblum's character is like the main character in the movie too. It just makes everything that much better. Like, oh great.
Yeah, I remember that one. Jeff Goldblum was like one of those actors that's so good, but so bad at the same time.
Yeah, can't help but like him.
Yeah, you have to like it at this point.
It's probably the best part of that Independence Day sequel. Oh, Jesus Christ, I didn't even mention that. Yeah, they made a sequel to Independence Day. That's another nostalgia thing I could mention. For some fucking reason, they thought it would be a good idea to make a sequel to a movie from the 90s. And then they tease a franchise at the end of it. And the movie bombed.
Who they brought in Bill Pullman and fucking Jeff Goldblum.
I saw that movie in theaters because I thought it would be good. And I saw it on my birthday of all the fucking times, dude.
On your birthday,
yeah,
4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, because and I regret it. I'm just like, why did I see this?
You wanted to see it because I'm blinded by nostalgia.
Yeah, nostalgia definitely drove me to see the movie. Same thing with the new Blade Runner movie. I guess you could say that's a good example of nostalgia because they somehow managed to take a movie that people were saying they couldn't have made a sequel to, and they did a pretty okay job making a sequel to it.
Yeah. Yeah, like a lot of people that use that seen that movie. It's one of those movies that you don't have to see the original for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's very nostalgic for those that have seen it.
Yeah, and it's like a movie that doesn't really too heavily rely on your nostalgia of the original movie. Like, it tries to do its own thing. And it tries to at least cleverly tie the new character into the events of the original movie.
Which is usually the best part about it.
Yeah. Did we talk about your nostalgia yet?
No, because it's fucking, oh yeah, dinosaur. Fucking dinosaurs, dude.
Jurassic Park is frightening in the dark. All the dinosaurs are running wild.
Yeah, then you're like Jurassic Park. Wait, Independence Day. No, wait, Blade Runner.
I just forgot. I just thought of all these other examples of nostalgia.
Yeah, it's like I have a lot of good nostalgia. It's funny enough, I have to think of some of it. I know one of them is Lego sets, the fucking what was it? The anniversary Lego sets that they had recently, last year or so. And because I'm a big fucking kid, I bought all of them. And they came with a little fucking figure. It came with what the old ones looked like, and they showed off this is what the new ones look like. This is what the old models used to look like. Not anymore. It wore fucking pieces. Like the fucking Slave One Boba Fett ship. The original set was 270 pieces, but this one's 1,000.
Oh boy.
I had fun putting all of them together. I mean,
I just thought of something too, and this is really weird, but can you have nostalgia for how old versions of websites, specifically fucking YouTube? I have nostalgia for 2006 YouTube or 2009, yes. When YouTube wasn't shit. I have nostalgia for that.
I have honestly, I have bad nostalgia for when YouTube was good.
I mean, it's did old YouTube have its share of really stupid and cringe shit? And it's yeah, but it also didn't have Google as the corporate overlords and just basically fucking everything up.
Yeah, it did. What was the dumb thing that they had? They had Cosmic Panda. Okay, that just came around, but it left because it was a New Year's. No, not New Year's. It was an April Fool's joke. But YouTube back then is not as bad as it is now.
YouTube is a hellscape now, and it's just getting worse every day. It's if you're a content creator on this site, and if you are a random ass dude and you're just starting a YouTube channel now, good fucking luck. And I'm one of those people again, because guess what? I got my fucking whole channel nuked by YouTube because of some stupid copyright shit, and I'm not going to let that go, because they did it just because I used images. And it was fair use. But fuck it. You're getting your channel nuked.
That's actually another thing that I'm actually really nostalgic for. But with old YouTube, it's the same thing. Now you have to deal with copyright claims. You have music used by Nintendo. You have music used by people that aren't even affiliated with it.
Certain smaller channels are going to get killed by the algorithm too. Like the algorithm will bury you. You won't get seen. People like if you're not a celebrity or if you're not Jimmy Kimmel, you're not gonna like nobody's gonna see your channel, and it's fucking sad.
Yeah,
because I remember when YouTube just used to be like basically by content creators and like for content creators, and it's just like it was a site that promoted creativity, and now it's a site that stifles that and promotes like celebrity culture and woke culture and all this other stupid shit, and it's basically trying to be like a network TV or like a streaming service, and that's not what YouTube is.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that YouTube never was. It was saying, hey, you might have potential to make something good. What's that? You actually have like some funny videos. Hey, it'll go viral. Oh, what's that? You have. I remember when Fred was #1 for the longest fucking time.
Oh god, yeah, I remember Fred.
Yeah, that's the YouTube I remember. I remember it was a big fucking competition between Fred, Ray William Johnson, Niga Higa, like all these old named YouTube celebrities.
Yeah, and I honestly kind of miss that. And mostly just because of the environment, because it's just like you could be this random dude and make like the dumbest fucking videos like Fred, and people will watch you. I mean, you could still do that, sure, but I don't know if you'll get as much attention.
Yeah, it's not really all that good anymore.
And you also got to worry about how politically correct you are now too. You can't say certain things.
It's like, keep in mind, nowadays, you can't do anything. Like, what's a good example? The whole Copa effect. How it's like, hey, is this family friendly? Yes. Then, too bad, you're not making money. Oh, but are you not family friendly? Well, too bad, you're not making money.
Pretty much. It's just a shame. It's one of those things where it's like, and the biggest problem too, of course, like everybody and their grandmothers mentioned, YouTube doesn't have any decent competition. So they can get away with pretty much anything.
That's why most people just go to Twitch.
Yeah, people are trying to abandon the platform, and we have other video sharing sites popping up, but they're just not doing, they're just not where people are going. People are still on YouTube. Like, I can use myself as an example, and I started one, I still have one, but I started a BitChute channel. And I was not getting any attention. I still am not really getting any attention on the site. It's really weird how the site works too, because I get a lot of views on videos, but I haven't gotten any I have gotten no ratings on them. It's really weird, and I'm like wondering if it's just bots. Like, I have no idea, but it's just like, well, this isn't really doing it for me. I might as well just go back to YouTube anyway. And I feel like that's a lot of people's mentality. They try to go to another site, and then they find out like this site isn't as good as YouTube or doesn't function as well as YouTube. So, and I'm not getting the audience I was getting on YouTube. So I guess I'm going to go back to YouTube and just kind of bite the bullet and go back there, even though YouTube is bullshit and it abuses me.
Yeah, and you just keep coming back with Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah. Because there's nothing else out there. So it's like, fuck it.
And when there is something out there, it's not as good.
Yeah. I know we just went into a huge tangent. Go on about your nostalgia.
Fuck my nostalgia.
Keep going into tangents when I was just like, hey, what about this?
Let's keep talking about YouTube and how much it sucks dick from time to time. But anyways, fuck. A lot of nostalgia. Like, how with you mentioned the whole thing about how PlayStation has certain sounds on it. With me, it's like, I kind of have to think, like, my Switch, for example, has the online feature to have NES games and Super Nintendo games. And playing some of the games that are on there, it makes me feel very nostalgic, because it's like, I'm playing an old game on the newest console. But it makes me feel like a little kid again.
Yeah.
And what's another thing that's kind of very nostalgic to me? Like, fuck. Most indie games out there kind of has that same effect on me. Like, as an example, Stardew. Stardew has retro style, like not in 64, Super Nintendo graphics. It looks like a Super Nintendo game, but it has more complexity to a AAA game. It has a lot of things to offer in it. And that's what I like about it. I like seeing games like that. All these games that will tickle my nostalgia, but also make me very blinded by it.
Yeah.
What's another thing that's very nostalgic?
Things that aren't games, maybe.
Things that aren't really games. Well, we already covered it all, like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, well, this is another thing that can make me kind of nostalgic. Star Wars Jedi: The Fallen Order is a good example because it makes me feel like, hey, I'm playing a Star Wars game that actually feels like a movie.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's like Star Wars is a good one. Ghostbusters, like any movie that is very good that I've seen before as a kid, I sometimes go back and watch it.
I guess speaking of Star Wars, I remember seeing like the prequels in theaters. That was always an interesting experience. You know, it's like I'm pretty sure I saw like all the prequels in theaters. So I saw that, and I saw the sequel trilogy in theaters, and I was like, oh god, what happened?
Speaking of Star Wars again, like it's also funny because I remember watching like Attack the Clones, and what makes me laugh is seeing Yoda go apeshit.
Yeah,
like when he takes
just jumping around.
Yeah, like I remember, like I kind of chuckled a little bit now, but I remember when I was a kid, like I was laughing along with most of the people in the fucking audience.
Yeah,
like it was fun to see.
Yeah. It's Star Wars isn't as fun anymore, except for maybe certain things, but definitely not the movies.
Yeah. Like anything that could be considered nostalgic. But I think we covered most things that are nostalgic from the get-go, but you know what? I can tell one thing that's very nostalgic. Like, since we didn't really talk about books, then there's one book that I read a lot when I was in high school. It was The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. I don't know, because I bought the same book, and it just makes me nostalgic, because it's like, I remember reading this a lot in my high school days. Buy it on Amazon.
Yeah, I guess for me in terms of books, the Goosebumps books when I was like in elementary school and middle school, and then I started getting into the Stephen King books. I started reading those in high school a lot, so I read a lot of his stuff.
You know, speaking of nostalgia, can I make the tangent that I hate how kids these days have things a lot better than what I used to have as a kid?
There's a lot more convenience that they probably have.
No, I'm talking about, like, I mentioned Lego sets and how there's like the fucking special edition, like, anniversary Star Wars sets of like Slave 1 and all that. I look at it now and all the Lego sets that came out for kids today, and I'm just looking at them going, these fuckers have it easy. These fuckers are lucky.
They don't know the struggle of building Lego.
No, it's not the struggle. I just look at it and going, why the fuck are these nicer than what I used to have? These fuckers don't get it.
Yeah, and that's the thing I kind of worry about, like, with the next generation. It's like, they're going to be so fucking spoiled.
Yeah,
I mean, they already are. We already have a bunch of fucking spoiled kids from my generation. Like, imagine, I mean, this generation, Gen Z, I don't want to even imagine the next one.
Yeah, I don't want to. What the fuck would they be called? Gen F?
I guess so.
As in fucked?
Generation fucked.
Yeah, essentially, because the Zoomers, some of them aren't.
Imagine the Zoomers being parents.
I don't want to imagine that.
I mean, we already have millennials being parents, and they're failing at that. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, the ones that really suck at it.
Yeah.
Oh, another part of my nostalgia, Hot Wheels.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the Hot Wheels. Obviously, we got Hot Wheels, Pokemon, fucking Yu-Gi-Oh. Obviously, I don't know why I didn't even mention Pokemon. Yeah, fucking. Really, but I'm also like, I guess I should mention that too. Like that should have been something I brought up. Pokemon is something I kind of don't care as much about, to be honest, anymore. Like I know there's a lot of people that still do. I just don't. Like I just don't really. I don't really care much about it anymore. I used to, but
yeah, I understand that.
It's just one of those things. I'm just like, it's just the same reason I don't really care about Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, and I was like, it just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, like another thing that plays my nostalgia is like the Detective Pikachu movie, because it's like a good attempt to make live action Pokemon.
Yeah, and it's like, and I guess you could technically say, yeah, it's like a live action anime movie or whatever.
Yeah, CGI type thing.
Yeah.
What was another one? Because I mentioned a remake, Link's Awakening for the Switch when it got remade. That also piqued my nostalgia because I remember playing it on the Game Boy and how fun it was.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think we've covered quite a bit. With
yeah, we just ended off with the things that we like fucking week.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one for me. I don't know.
I'm not cheating. I'm not using Ghost of Tsushima this week. Even though it's a game. Like, use something different. I'm going to use something different.
What are you thinking?
Funny enough, it's actually funny. I didn't mention this, but how I came to come up with this topic for nostalgia. I was watching James Rolfe review, he was reviewing old movies, but he was also giving his top 10 reasons why Blu-ray sucks.
Really?
Yeah, and the fun thing about it is I'm just listening to him and I was thinking, oh, he's going to get angry like he is with AVGN, but he's not angry. He's just talking normally. He's like, oh yeah, I don't like Blu-rays because the menus are boring, not like DVDs. Sometimes the cases are bad. The cases take too much space. And he'll just...
I would debate that, honestly. It's like, no, Blu-ray cases are typically slimmer. Menus, it depends. Depends on which...
It's a limited edition.
Yeah, it depends on which distributor it is and all this other stuff. But I mean, it's just like... it's like, I understand, the same thing with nostalgia. I understand people have nostalgia for, old video formats like VHS and DVD, but it's we have to realize these are outdated formats and they're outdated for a reason. Blu-ray has a better picture quality, it has better audio quality, and now 4K is coming along too, and it's that's another thing. 4K is higher resolution, it's better color density and all this other stuff. So eventually that might phase out Blu-ray. So it's just it's like I said, I understand nostalgia for it. It's good to have it as a collector's item or whatever, but Blu-ray is just, it's, in my opinion, it's here to stay. It's just a better video format, better video quality, and I mean, I can kind of understand his complaints, but it's just to me, it's kind of nitpicky and dumb, at least in my opinion. But
well, it depends on what he listed 10 things. I forgot what it was, but
yeah, I've seen his other videos where he's talking normally as opposed to where he's really angry.
Yeah, it's because I started
angry, I guess.
Yeah, because I was watching his both his old and newer episodes of AVGN, and he's one of those content creators that he doesn't get pulled into drama. He always avoids it, which is good. He has a passion for what he really enjoys. And overall, he's still a funny guy to this day, even though he had some fuck-ups along the way.
So I take it your favorite thing this week was James Rolfe?
Yeah, just because I've been watching some of his stuff, his movie topic stuff and his newer AVGN episodes. Still think he's a funny guy to this day. That's it for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something for me. I guess I'm just thinking of stuff that I've watched or read recently. I guess I'll go with something I rewatched recently, which is An American Werewolf in London. It's a really good fucking horror movie. Like, and it's just like I guess it's relevant because it's a movie from the 80s. And it's a movie that does something that I really wish more movies would do today, which is use a lot of these crazy practical effects, and especially a lot of the in particular, like how the werewolf transformation was done in the movie is just really impressive, and it's just something I just don't really feel like you'd see a lot today in like a lot of newer movies, because a lot of it would be accomplished through like CG or special effects, some other sort of technique. Whereas like, and this is another reason why like 80s movies or older movies, like especially horror movies, have some a little bit more of an appeal to them, because a lot of the directors back then were limited by the time period, and like they were limited because they didn't have all this technology that we have now, so they had to basically improvise, and that led to some pretty crazy and really great stuff. And we just aren't, I don't think we're really going to get that kind of stuff anymore unless we get a director who's willing to kind of go above and beyond in order to kind of do a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like this movie's a good example of some of the things that we've kind of discussed in this podcast, and like especially what I've discussed with like movies, and how like I feel like older horror movies are like just more appealing to me. But this is probably like, at least of the werewolf movies I've seen, like this is my favorite. And the plot isn't really anything complex. It's just some dude. These two guys go to England on vacation, and they end up getting attacked by a werewolf, and one of his friends dies, and he ends up getting slowly turning into a werewolf. So it's kind of like, it has some aspects of like body horror stuff, and it also has like him basically hallucinating his dead friend, and he's like, it has comedic elements too, which of course makes sense considering the director is directed a lot of comedies in the past, and there's some elements of that, even though I wouldn't say it's a comedy movie. It has comedic elements, like him talking to his dead friend, and his dead friend just kind of hanging out and eating stuff in front of him, and then like just kind of being really nonchalant whenever his dead friend talks to him. And there's also another scene, I'm not sure if it was intended to be funny, but I kind of laughed at it, because like there's this nurse in the movie who like starts to like the main guy, and she takes him back to her place, and it's funny just how she just doesn't really beat around the bush or anything. She's like, look, I find you really attractive, and she doesn't really outright say it, but she's like, I want to have sex with you, really like heavily implies, and just like the next scene they're having sex in the shower. It's like they don't even they just get right to it, and I'm just like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I remember how most films, like, they didn't really show much of it, but there are some films that are like, oh yeah, we're having sex.
Yeah, just cut to the next scene, they're having sex.
Jesus.
Yeah. But I guess you could say that's my favorite thing this week, is like, I rewatched the movie, and I really enjoyed it. I've kind of been on this like rewatching old horror movie kick recently. Like I was doing it with mostly because of the stuff I got, because my birthday happened recently, and I got a lot of these old horror movies. I started watching the George Romero like zombie movies, so I kind of like, I guess if we'd started doing this podcast like a couple weeks ago, I probably would have been saying that was my favorite thing this week. I watched Night of the Living Dead for the first time, and I was actually like, and I usually have an aversion to watching like black and white movies, but Night of the Living Dead is like one of those movies. It's just like, you can kind of get over the fact that it's shot in black and white. It's just like really fucking good, and it doesn't feel like a cheesy like 60s movie like how it came out in '68. It feels like it's kind of timeless in that regard.
Yeah, some movies are nowadays.
Yeah, same thing with like movies like Psycho too. Like it's like, it came out later on in that time period, and it's black and white, but it's also just pretty brutal, especially for the time period.
Yeah, it's like completely unsettling.
Yeah.
Or the old the Howard Hawks' The Thing. How it was somewhat comedic, but at the same time, it was a horror film. But
I think like a lot of Hitchcock movies too, like kind of have that feel to them, where like they're pretty like, even though they came out at a certain time, they they kind of pushed the limits of what they could show during that time period.
Yeah, I remember Hitchcock and how another thing that they done, because you said that Hollywood has no creative bone in their body. They use their Hitchcock's ideas, Rear Window, then Shia LaBeouf movie Disturbia.
Oh, Disturbia, yeah.
Not a bad movie, no way, no way, shape, or form, but you could tell that it was heavily influenced.
Yeah, definitely. It's pretty much Rear Window, which I haven't actually seen that movie, but I actually really did like Disturbia. It's one of the few Shia LaBeouf movies I actually enjoyed. I guess that and the first Transformers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing that's very nostalgic: old cartoons.
Transformers.
That's one. Old cartoons like the Batman animated series, fucking Animaniacs. Those cartoons from the old days.
Yeah.
The old days of the 90s.
It's. I guess you could say it's the old days now.
Yeah, it's retro now.
Yeah, that's strange to think about. But yeah, I think that's okay. Do we have what we recommend to people who are without thinking about it?
Yeah, it's out of all things that we just talked about, nostalgic, what's the one thing that you would recommend to people without thinking about it?
What do you mean by without thinking about it? Just
top of the head, if it's something that you were playing something recently that's very nostalgic to you.
There's a lot of stuff. I guess it really depends. I think there are things that are required viewing. There are people out there that actually never seen the original Star Wars trilogy.
Oh,
and I don't understand this. This is a problem, and it needs to be corrected immediately.
This is a problem. We gotta fix this. Tie them down to the chair.
I guess that's something I would definitely say off the top of my head. If you have not seen the original Star Wars trilogy, you are doing yourself a massive disservice, and you need to fix that.
But Chaos, I like the future trilogy.
Yeah. Then you see the original movies, you'll hate it.
Yeah, then they look at the original trilogy and they'll just go, what the fuck were they thinking?
Yeah.
But, great. It's the one thing that I would recommend to people, nostalgic. Honestly, it's what I remember that I did this before and people were irritated whenever I kept doing this.
What?
When Stardew Valley came out. Honestly, because I love Harvest Moon. It's very nostalgic of Harvest Moon and Room Factory, and that's the one thing that really, really piqued my interest with that game. Mm-hmm. And then I bought it. I think I bought a copy for you and a few other people that I knew wanted to play it. And I remember I was talking to a lot of people, and I wouldn't shut up about Stardew. They're like, "Man, you like this game a lot, don't you?"
Yeah, so you'd recommend that?
Yeah, it's very nostalgic to Harvest Moon. It's if Harvest Moon was actually good.
Yeah.
Which
another Harvest Moon.
Yeah, Stardew plays like that, but it has a lot more to do in it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, even though I don't own this, I actually want to get Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, because it's essentially Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, but with a fresh coat of paint. And I want it.
Yeah. I've just never been a big farming sim guy or simulator person in general. Never really been big on sims. But anyways, I think we should probably do our outros. So I'll just I'll just go ahead and plug my stuff. You can find me on YouTube at Captain Chaos, obviously, where this video is going to be posted. You can also find me on Twitter at Captain Chaos. And you can also find me on Instagram at Enigmatic Arts, and you can find me as well on Etsy, where I sell my prints at Enigmatic Prints.
And with me, I am on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch as Levy the Irishman, but that's go figure.
Yeah. Yeah, so this podcast was the longest one we've done.
So far, it's surprising, I know.
We are clocking in at almost 2 hours. Yeah.
it's mostly say, fuck Star Wars future trilogy.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff we talked about too, so it's like, I mean, nostalgia is a pretty big topic, so I mean, it kind of made sense. As soon as you said the topic of this, I'm just like, this is probably going to be a long one.
Yeah, that's actually good. It shows that we can actually talk for this long.
Yeah, exactly. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this, even though it was a little bit longer, and it was also a little bit more rambly, but sometimes that can be for the better. Sometimes, it leads to some interesting topics. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed listening, and, until next time, we will see you all later.